Hello, 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 gorgeous people. Hello, listeners. Hello, beauties. Hello, my amazing, lovely, trusting people who have dared to put this on and have a little listen. Thank you. I really, I'm really sourcing from a deep place, from an ancient place, I think, to bring this to you, and it's bringing up lots of fear, lots of terror for me, and I'm remembering that the word terror is the beginning of the word terrific, and I hope that this is a terrific experience for you. And this is my third podcast, so it's been making me think about the number 3, which is really important in fairy stories. There's lots of threes, 3 little pigs, 3 wishes, and we're going to have a bundle of 3 stories at the end of this podcast that come in 3 in the Book of Grimm Tales. The brothers collected them and bundled them all together. And I noticed when I was reading different books to work out why they were so popular. I was reading Harry Potter. I was reading the first chapter of loads of books to think, what is it about this book that really captured people's imaginations? And I was reading Harry Potter, and in the first chapter, different people say the most famous boy in the world, the boy's name on everybody's lips, the boy who everyone will know. And I thought, that's a spell. That is a spell. And she's a clever woman, and she wouldn't have done that by mistake, J.K. Rowling. So I'm going to do the same here. So this podcast will be in everybody's ears. This podcast will be listened to all over the world. This podcast will be nectar to the soul of so many, and a real sweet relief and deep connecting journey for all those who listen. That's my spell for today's podcast. And I wonder what it is that you want to magnetize in your life. And if you could say it out loud to someone, or just, wooden spoon in the kitchen or your steering wheel. Just, I find the washing machine gets a lot of conversation when I'm trying to work things out. I wonder what you would say 3 times that you wanted to really bring towards you to really make happen in your life. But it's not a Healy podcast. I think there's plenty of those. So, yeah, this podcast, I would love to grow. I would love to just really, really grow so that by the autumn, when I go out storytelling again, it can be kind of like part storytelling, part sort of podcasting. That would be my great desire. Not that I'm not going to do any storytelling between now and then, but kind of bookings take care of themselves over this spring, summer time. And then in the winter, I kind of book a venue and hunker down and sort of stay in one place and tell stories through the winter. I'd love you to join me. So keep your ears out and your eyes out for when I'm doing that. But last week, we were meandering about whistling because I'd gone to see Hannah Taluki. And I'm sorry, Hannah, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. It will rectify that at a later date. But I went to see Hannah Taluki singing to the birds on the morning of Beltane, on the morning of May Day, as a way of calling in the summer. And so I've been thinking about whistling ever since then. And obviously the people that do it the best are, the working classes and the birds. And I don't hear that anymore. I don't hear people whistling anymore. And I think I did, or maybe I imagined it, but didn't people whistle more many years ago? And have they stopped whistling because there's nothing to whistle about? Because I think you need to be pretty happy to whistle, pretty uplifted to whistle. And I found out that the birds whistle in the morning because it's that kind of moisture on the air means that they can sing further. So I've been going for these walks and I've been whistling with the birds. And I've just been listening and repeating and listening and repeating. So like, whatever, but listening to them and repeating. And I was walking along and I whistled. I was listening to a whistle and then I repeated it. And then the bird, I'm sure it was whistling back. And then I whistled again. And then I'm sure it was whistling back. I'm sure it was whistling back really like 3 times. And it was so thrilling. I just went like this. And then there was dead silence. And I think I really freaked that bird out. So, part of this podcast comes along with an apology to that bird. I really didn't mean to. If you're listening, bird, this podcast is dedicated to you. Yeah. And at the weekend I was officiating a ceremony, as I do sometimes, and there was this guy whistling, like making bird whistling noises. So I was thrilled and I went up to him and I said, when did you start making those whistling noises? How did you learn? And kind of, notepad to the ready. And he said, well, when I was at school, they thought it'd be a really good idea to put all the most disruptive children together with an inexperienced teacher. And I was like, don't really know where this is going. And he said, yeah, and we all had our trick. One of us could hold his breath for so long he'd turn purple, which tickled me. And another one would lead us in this like we'd all, when she was turned around, we'd all stamp our feet. And then when she'd look back again, we'd all stop. And I could whistle and I can do it like this. And he showed me and he said, and you couldn't see, his face wasn't moving and he was whistling and she wouldn't know where it was coming from. So I love that way of using whistling. It got me thinking about other ways of using whistling, to call people or, pickpockets. It'd be like someone's coming. Whole language in whistling, I'm sure, has at some point and places been used. And then I was listening to the radio and the DJ was talking about Emmett Till. And Emmett Till, in the 1950s, he was in Mississippi and he was in a shop in like the local store and he whistled at a woman in there. And then 4 days later, the husband and the half-brother, they beat him to death, basically. Brutally beat him to death. And the mum so courageously demanded that his body be put in an open casket so that the people could see how brutally he'd been beaten. And how incredible to do that. And I really believe that things need to be revealed. I really love family constellations, which is a modality where it's kind of like a kind of field of drama where people get to play different characters in your family and secrets kind of bubble up. It's really incredible work. But the belief in family constellations is that secrets can really sort of drag the energy out of a family, and I think secrets can really drag the energy out of the world. So in that way, just thinking of you. I mean, I don't know her mum's name. She's just credited as mother. But yeah, in this moment, just thinking about you. And the other thing that I noticed is that when I called the first podcast, Wet Lips and the Wild, it suddenly spiked in listeners. Before, I think it was just like storytelling or something like that. So obviously I was referring to whistling, but I don't think some people who clicked on were necessarily thinking about whistling when they thought about wet lips And that has been a source of curiosity for me this week. And so I looked up lots of different words for a woman's anatomy. And when I looked up cunt, there we are, I'm just going to say it because it's actually what I want to talk about. When I looked up cunt, it said a vulgar word for the vulva. And I just thought, who's writing this that doesn't recognise that the root of vulgar and vulva are the same thing? And I'm wanting to celebrate my body, or even just feel connected to it, because I just feel like there's so much language that disconnects me from my body, from just really inhabiting my body deep down into my root. I think it's all about earthing, bringing me back to the terrified. It's like connected with the earth. And the more that I am out of my body, the more that I am trying to escape myself, the more disconnected from the earth I am, the more vulnerable I am. I mean, basically, the more money you can make out of me, because I'm buying this, that, and the other to try and live when I don't need it. You know, if we're connected to the earth, then we're growing our own stuff. Then we don't have a hole. We're not trying to fill this hole where we should be inhabiting inside ourselves. Yeah, I think it's home. And it's so used as a derogatory term. And it's the same, I know, I was talking to my mum about it, and she was saying, well, what about prick? You know, prick is a word that's, you know, demeaning. It's like, you know, tiny and inconsequential, just a little prick. Yeah, so let's bring our bodies back. I know that when I go on stage, if I'm going to tell a story, then I will often just kind of pull up my skirt, anasamaya that's called, to kind of, you know, raise your skirt and use your, what should we call it? I don't know. Fanny. When I was little, we called it fanny. Yoni just feels not quite right. I mean, cunt, it's like, surely it's the beginning of country. It's my land. It's my land. Cunty, it's like, it softens it, but it's like, does it have to be? Do we have to be softened? So I've started to use the word country, my country, to myself. And that feels good for me, actually. Yeah, and so before I go on to tell stories, if I'm feeling a bit out of my body, if I'm feeling like my feet aren't quite landed on the ground, I will pull up my skirt and just have a look at her. And it's like looking at a very, very, very old woman, very old, wise woman. She's got a lot to say, you know. She's got a lot of opinions that she keeps to herself sometimes. And then when I go on stage, I think about that. My lips, her lips, those lips. And I think about, I'm not bidden, you know, I'm not consciously thinking, but these are the images that come into my mind of a stone, you know, stones, caves, long barrows. I think about long barrows, think about entrances to the earth, gateways in to the depths of the earth. And that's a really good imaginative landscape for me to tell a story from. A really connected place for me to tell a story from. And it gets me totally beyond, oh, you know, is my story going to be any good, or are they going to like me, or are they going to get it, or anything like that. It's not how it is. It's just like, little thing there from my speaker. I need to get involved in the conversation. Yeah, it's just like, I am the voice of the earth. and what comes through me has got sustenance, trusting that what comes through in story has got sustenance. And I'm aware that, I'm a storyteller, so I do think it's like the most important thing. And that reminds me of the Romeo and Juliet, the Romeo and Juliet film, and they ask the nurse, what's the story about that Shakespeare's writing? And she says, oh, it's about this nurse. And that we all see things from our perspective and we all give ourselves the main role. But the more I have told stories, the more I know that it is my way of bringing something very right. It just feels just right. So I'm going to tell a story now. This little bundle of 3 stories that we have, and I wanted to tell this story now at the beginning of the podcast, at the beginning of the podcast journey, podcast number 3, as I mentioned before, because it's one of my early, and I think I had a Ladybird book, and it may have been along with The Hobbit, which I'll probably talk about a little bit afterwards, my first experience of the little people, of the kind of magical presence, kind of the written word, or the story of these magical presences. So I am finding my way with my breath, noticing it's warm, my lips, feeling my belly soft, seeing the world of this story creating itself around me, kind of in a circle, like as if I'm on a very slow moving merry-go-round, and trusting that the story will begin itself in just the right moment. Once upon a time. Can you feel the doors opening? Can you feel the ears opening? Can you feel that people have listened and spoken those words for so long, for so many times? Can you feel yourself leaning in when a story's wrapped in a once upon a time? Once upon a time, there was a poor, hard-working shoemaker. He worked so hard, his fingers were calloused at the end of his fingers, and his eyesight was going after so long looking at the tiny details of the shoes, and his back was sore from leaning over all day. But buying shoes from the shoemaker was going out of fashion. Buying shoes online, buying trainers made by factories, that was much more desirable. And so the leather shoes sold less and less and less, and he was buying less and less and less leather, until one day he only had enough leather to make one pair of shoes. And he just couldn't see how life was going to continue. And he was making this one pair of shoes, but it wasn't like the way he used to make shoes, with vim. I think viv's a word, actually. Vim. It wasn't like that. It was a sad and solemn procedure. And actually halfway through he just gave up. He was just like, can't even remember how to make shoes. He just couldn't even put the needle through the leather anymore. He just didn't have the oomph for it. So he went to bed, listened to some beautiful music in bed, Listen to some exquisite song in bed. Listen to some sonorous viola in bed. Really slept and dreamed and recouped and remended himself, but woke up in the morning like feeling really stressed about the shoes that he hadn't made. And he went downstairs, and there on his counter they were the shoes made, not just made, the leather until it was like the butteriest leather, and the stitches, they were, even in his heyday when his fingers were the nimblest, he couldn't make stitches like that. They were they were absolutely gorgeous. And there was a kind of sheen around the shoes that made them look even more special and spectacular. And he had only just put them in the window, the bay window of his shop, when someone came in and bought them and gave him a tip. And he had never in his life had a tip before, but there they were. So he gets the money, leather, and he sits down to make the shoes, and he's like, what if I go to bed and I leave these? I wonder if I wake up in the morning and they will be made. So he goes to bed, and he's in bed now, and as he's in bed, he's remembering the times when he's been to weddings and funerals and celebrations of birth. He's remembering all these times and all the music and the poetry and the words that have been said over those times. He's thinking about honouring life and death, and he falls asleep. And when he wakes up in the morning, he goes downstairs and his heart's beating, and he's not sure what he's going to see, but there they are. There are 2 pairs of shoes, and they are just ding dang. They're so gorgeous. He sells them very quickly, and he buys more leather. And this goes on and on and on and on. And so he becomes prosperous, and his wife is like, wow, let me into this secret. And he tells her, and they decide, it's coming close to Christmas time, and they've got people that they want to see who it is that's doing this. So they hide. And they wait. And the clock in the workshop strikes midnight. And tumbling out come 2 little people. Tiny, tiny, tiny little people. And they laugh and they roll and they joke together, and all the while they're heaving with these great needles and pushing and working together, and they run off again. And the wife says, oh, we have to thank them somehow. We have to leave them something somehow. And she says, I'm going to make them some fine cloaks, because when they're not rumbling and tumbling around, they must get chilly. And the man says, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make them some shoes, and I might not make them as fine as they make my shoes, but I'm going to make them with all the love in my heart. So they make these garments with all the love in their hearts. They sew them, and they bench, and they hide again. I hope they're comfortable. I mean, I think I even thought this when I was really little, I hope they're comfortable, because it's like, when you play hide and seek and you get yourself into a position and you just think in the end you want them to find you because you're all crunched up. And so they wait. And then people come tumbling out, and they're little tiny people, and they try on their cloaks and they put on the shoes, and they're so, so, so happy. And off they tumble. Now I'm doing this tapping, but I'm not doing that to annoy you like the kid did with the teacher. I'm just wanting to keep the life of the story moving as the story finishes. Whilst I just talk a little bit about the meanings for me of the story. Because it's very sort of Christianised in the Grimm's tales. And it's really important for us that I have to tell stories until I've kind of really got to the kernel of them. What's this story really about? anciently about, you know, with all the layers, with all the, you know, oh, let's use the story in Sunday school to make sure that children do this or do that, or for control, for manipulation and control, like everything. And look how story has been used for manipulation and control in this time, for in advertising and all kinds of things. So, or a production of the story in Bristol Old Vic, and Kid Carpet was the shoemaker, and he stayed up all night making music. He was a DJ, and he stayed up all night making music, and kind of would wake up sort of over his turntable and would be like, oh no, I stayed up all night making music again and I haven't done my work, and he'd go down, his work had been made. And I was like, yes, I just love that concept of like that idea of do what you love, just do what you love, and hand it over when you need support to hand it over. Expect a miracle. Also ask for practical support. I say that as a dyspraxic person that needs a bit of support with things every now and again. But I just love that idea. Just do what you love and trust that things will fall into place. And it's not the same as, you know, just be distracted, stay up all night watching, scrolling. It's not. It's like be totally engaged in what you love and trust. So I love that idea. And also I know that you know that this story is called The Shoemaker, but it wasn't in the Germanic actual translation. It's Wietelmanner. I don't know how you pronounce that. A German person could tell me. I'd really appreciate that. Maybe I lost my friend Johanna. And that's like witchman, which is white or wits. It's a Proto-Germanic term meaning thing or creature. Creature, I love that word. So it did get me thinking about elves, and this has been my experience in my childhood until I read The Hobbit. Now, Mrs. Lee did read the first chapter of The Hobbit to us in reception at school. Thank you. Really, thank you, because oh wow, wow. I was just completely absorbed and engaged, but only the first chapter, I think. Or I never read any more of it until I read it to my son about 5 years later, and I sat and I read that very first chapter, and then he had fallen asleep, or we just kind of fell asleep together on the bed. He was about 8 or 9. And then I swear on my life, these kind of these images just bowled towards me. They came roly-polying towards me, and they said, now you want to write a book like that about us. We want you to write a book about us. And I was like, well, I've never written a word. I was like, oh my God, I don't feel up. Like, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. Anyway, they introduced themselves as Nook and Cranny. And they were things, they were creatures, they were, I don't have the word for them. Brownies, munchkins, I don't know. And so I spent quite a bit of time then for the rest of the year. I do feel like, you know, something like that comes to you strongly, to you know, honouring it was important. So whenever I was storytelling for children, I out these would describe these characters of Nook and Cranny, and I would just kind of evolve the story or make up the story with the children. And so I did that at different schools, and then in the local library, I had a Monday session in the local library, and the local kids gave me some ideas. And then I was at a camp, and we got so far, there were these 2 children, they were running across a field, and one of them fell in a massive hole, and the other one, and Nook and Cranny, go on these great adventures trying to find the get the boy back. It's a boy and a girl. The girl is so that they can get back in time for tea and not, you know, upset the parents. And I remember asking where he'd fallen, and a kid saying, in the Elf King's pocket. And I was like, oh, I mean, can you just see that image? Just like a kid just falling down a hole, falling and falling and falling and falling and falling, and then dropping into the Elf King's pocket. So then the story really evolved around Nook and Cranny and this girl going down and the Elf King and asking for him to look in his pocket, and he finds this little boy in his pocket, and they're much more like elves for me now that I have kind of entered into the Tolkien world. This sort of very tall, ethereal, magical creatures. Kind of, they have sort of a reputation for kind of seriousness rather than these kind of fun, roly-poly little. I imagined when I first read The Elves and the Shoemaker, and when I was exploring different podcasts, one of the podcasts that I was listening to was I think it's called the Immortal Starlight podcast, and it's a woman who channels the elven realms. I mean, get this for a story. It's just so gorgeous. I'm completely enchanted by it. She had this vision. Am I going to get this right? So that there was a grove of silver birch trees, and a deer walked into the centre of the grove of birch trees and lay down and gave its life. And then the bark of the silver birch trees began to unravel and unfold and come together to form pages, and the skin, the hide of the deer became the cover, and there was this book in the centre of this magical grove of trees. And then she kept going back to this vision, that the pages and deciphering what was in that book, and that book was eventually published and called The Silver Wheel. And it's it's gorgeous. And maybe I was going to read a little bit from it, but I forgot to ask her permission, so maybe next time I will. So on to the second story, because if you remember, these stories came in a bundle of 3. Also, I mean, you can't say the word... every time I say the word elves, I think of Elvis. Anyway, on to the second story. So there's a poor servant girl, and she's sweeping. She spends so much time sweeping, it's like, shh, 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 shh. She can hear that in her dreams. Shh, 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 shh. In her dreams, just like this noise. And one day she doesn't even notice, she's like sweeping. And then on top of her pile of sweepings, it's one of my really terrible habits that when I sweep the kitchen, I just leave the pile. And I just leave the pile. My mum's coming round, which she is later. So, and then I frantically tidy up, which I shall be doing at the end of this pod. So there's this on top of her pile, there's this kind of golden shimmering letter, and she can't read, so she takes it to this old woman who she's seen reading these old recipe books. She takes it to the old woman, and the old woman says, well, you have been invited to the birth of an elven child. And the girl's going, oh no, I'm not going to that. That's enough of that freaky stuff. I'm not going there. And she says, this is a great honour, you should go. So in the end, she does convince her, and she goes, and they go to the Hollow Mountain. And let's just think for a moment where the hills are where we live. Where are the hills? There's magic in them hills. Where are the hills? Where are the hills? Where are the crystals? Where are the caves? Just think about, live wherever you live. There's a hill near. There's magic in that hill. Where's the closest mountain to you? Yeah, I think maybe Cunning is the closest mountain to me, but I could be wrong. And so she finds her way into the Hollow Mountain, and everything is tiny and beautiful and ornate and gorgeous, and she dances, and they celebrate the birth of this baby, and they say, oh, it's a real honour to have a human here. We really wanted a human here. Thank you for blessing us. And they persuade her doesn't want to stay, but they say stay 3 days. And in that 3 days, she she drinks and laughs and learns spell making and flies and does all kinds of shimmering and delicious things. And on the third day, she says, no, actually, I really do want to go. So they let her go. And when she comes back, it's been 7 years. When she comes back, it's been 7 years. And her master has died, and a lot of things have changed. And I feel like this story could really be used as a sort of cautionary tale to not kind of go away with the fairies, but I don't think that's what it's about. I think it's about, isn't that a great thing? Her master's died. She's not beholden to anyone anymore. She's spent time going deep within the mountains of herself, laughing and playing and celebrating birthing. And she's come out and her master's died. She's not beholden to anyone anymore. Shoemaker, they make the shoes and they run off and they never come back again. And I think that's because they've integrated. It's like we have these amazing experiences in our lives and then they integrate. If we're keeping on trying to repeat them on the outside, then we're kind of running something. And so I think the elves in the shoemaker story is about, integrating the magic as well. So the third story is about the elves. Remember that this translation of elves is creature or thing in it. They swap the baby with a changeling. So there's kind of like it's not your baby. And the woman's like, this isn't my baby. I'm sure it's a changeling. And wow, that was really a reality at some time, that people would believe that their child had been taken, and maybe it had been. Who knows? Who am I to say what? In this time when people whistled because they were that connected with the birds, when they whistled because they were carefree. Language. Who am I to say that babies weren't changed into changelings? So the neighbour in this story, she says, you've got to make the baby laugh. You've got to make this changeling laugh. And they try all kinds of things, jokes and farting and, all kinds of stuff. But the changeling's not laughing. And then in the end, they come about with this idea where they boil water into eggshells. And there she sets about, she's on the fire. She puts the baby by the hearth and she lights the fire and she's got this water into eggshells. And then the water starts bubbling and the changeling is laughing. And then when she does that, the band of elves suddenly appear and they bring the child back and they set it back on the hearth and they take the changeling away. And this always reminds me, I was telling a story once at a camp when my son was a baby, and I just thought it'd be really good to put him into the story. So I was outside and I was telling the story, and I held him as a baby and I was saying, I'm fed up with him. Sometimes I just wish the fairies would come and take him away. And then these 3 teenage girls who were dressed as fairies, they came and they took him away. That they were delighted by him and he by them, but I probably had 20 minutes before he'd start going, where's my mum? So they took him, they played with him whilst I was telling the rest of the story and went this big adventure to find him. And then whilst he was away, they painted him head to toe in gold and they brought him back totally painted gold after 20 minutes. And we're like, we're sorry, we were just playing with him. And he was happy as anything. I mean, nothing's changed for him. He's still very much interested in teenage girls. To the story. I love this playful way of making the child laugh, sort of engaging imaginatively and creatively in that way of making the child laugh. I really like that. Yeah, wondering if I've got any more to say on this podcast, any more to offer you about stories in the world. No, I think that's it, my friends. Please stick this podcast on your timeline, text it to someone, WhatsApp it, however you communicate, or somewhere where there's people talk about it or tell them about it. I really would love it to grow and grow and grow. And blessings on your life and your sunny day. Think of me. I'll be listening to podcasts and cleaning up my house for the arrival. All right, lots of love. Bye bye.